You already have.
I'd like to call this meeting of your Newark City Council to order. Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Fennell.
Here.
Mr. Frazier.
Here.
Ms. Hall. Here. Mr. Labutus.
Present.
Mr. Lang.
Here.
Mr. Marmee.
Present.
Mr. Rath.
Here.
Mr. Blake.
Here.
Mr. Bub.
Here.
Mr. Cost.
Here. We have all here this evening. If you please rise for the invocation by Mr. Labutus, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, as we come to you in prayer this evening, we thank you for this opportunity to come together to meet and discuss the issues of the city. We also think today of the passing of former Police Chief Hummelsheim. I ask that you would be with his family and those that served with him during his time here at the Newark City Police Force, that you would comfort them and help them to have fond memories of their time with him. Be with us this evening in all that we do and say. Be with our time together and help us to have your vision and your insight for our city. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Labutus. Next on the agenda this evening, we have caucus. That's the time for council to discuss anything pertinent to the agenda tonight. Do we have anything? Seeing none, we'll move on to our minutes from our April 2nd, 2018 meeting. Is there a motion to approve those?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Frazier, second by Mr. Lang. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. I did watch the tape of the last meeting since I wasn't here. Thank you, Mr. Bub, for standing in for me. You did a good job.
Thank you.
I'll probably not miss any more because you did that good of a job. I don't want you taking my seat.
right.
All right. Next, under appointments, we're appointing Mark Labutus to the Tax Incentive Review Council. His term will expire December 31st, 2019. Mr. Labutus will be taking the place of our former council person, Mrs. Floyd. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. Also, we're appointing, council needs to appoint Roy Venata to the Community Reinvestment Area Housing Council. By recommendation of the Department of Development Director Mark Motter, his term will expire December 31st, 2018. Mr. Motter, would you like to say anything?
I don't know if most of you know Roy Venata. He's the deputy auditor under Mike Smith over the county. Roy's got some experience working with the tax incentive review committees over there at the county level, and also some experience working with the community reinvestment area councils as well. So I thought he'd be a good match for our board members over there, and reached out to Roy, and he was more than happy to accept. So I'd highly recommend it.
Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Next, we have reports of standing committees. We have two, one from Finance and one from Service. Without objection, those will be received and filed. Also, under reports from city officials, we have one from our auditor, Stephen Johnson, the operating report for the period ending March 31st, 2018. Without objection, that will also be received and filed. Under communications this evening, we have four. First, we'll start with Mayor Hall, a proclamation for Child Abuse Prevention Month. Mayor?
Thank you, President. Thank you. Please. Good. Whereas National Child Abuse Prevention Month began in 1983 as part of a presidential proclamation to raise awareness of the alarming rates at which children were being abused and neglected. This annual event is to raise awareness, education, prevention, and tougher sentencing for child abuse and crimes against children in the United States and across our communities. Statistics on crimes against children each year in the United States are staggering, sobering, and should compel all of us to want to get involved with this effort. Parents, families, and communities can help reduce child abuse and neglect by recognizing that prevention starts with each of us. This year, Newark will hold its 6th annual Million March Against Child Abuse at the Lincoln County Family YMCA, beginning at 1 o'clock p.m. this coming Saturday, because last Saturday was not very conducive weather. Now, therefore, I, Jeff Hall, Mayor of the great city of Newark, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2018 Child Abuse Prevention Month in Newark, Ohio, and urge all citizens to get involved in the effort to prevent child abuse and neglect. Renee works hard each month each year and each month to get to this month when they do have a wonderful march, and we hope you have great weather coming this Saturday for that. But thank you for coming in. Everybody, please give Renee a round of applause for all of you. You've got the floor.
I just appreciate the city and the police department and Mayor Hall for supporting us every year, and just really kicking off April for child abuse and neglect. It's every day, but the totals for 2017 in Licking County was 1,778 reported abuse cases in Licking County, and that totaled 2,660 children involved. It is a growing epidemic, and I hope that our raising awareness every year helps put a stop to those numbers.
We'll meet behind the Y at the Mitchell Center at 1 o'clock, is that correct, this coming Saturday? If anybody would like to be involved in that walk, and of course if you go down 16, you can see up on the hillside there.
That's where we walk to. Is
they walk to us through that way, and so very good. Well, thank you very much, Renee. I appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you, Mayor and Renee. Next, we have 3 communications from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. One, a transfer application request from Huber Lodge, Inc., DBA Courtyard by Marriott, 500 Highland Boulevard. A new application request from McKenna's Market, 2 Park Place. And a new application for Sean Smith, The Hub at 370 West Church Street. Those will be received and filed and sent off. Next, we have comments from citizens. There's 2 places for comments from citizens this evening. One is now, one is after the legislation. Basically, if you hold your hand up and let me know you want to speak, this is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to be heard. Do we have anyone for the first section of citizens' comments? Mr. Butcher.
I'm Wayne Butcher, 263 Union Street. I went home last Monday, and then I done down my neighborhood. There's hundreds down the street, but right from my residence, there's no fire hydrants. And I said to myself, what in the world what happened if a group besides jumbo jet crushed one of these apartments? And I said to myself, we would have one heck of catastrophe, one heck of a mess. And I'd like to know what the city's going to do about the fire hydrant program. I'd like to know what the city's going to do about the fire hydrants on Union Street. I pass.
Thank you, William. Anyone else for this first section? Please raise your hand. Ma'am?
Hi, my name's Elizabeth. I need to go to the microphone?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, that'll make me nervous.
Well, you'll do fine.
Okay,
You'll just give us your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Hampton, 242 Trail Court, Newark, Ohio. I don't have anything formally prepared. I wasn't expecting to come, and then I saw the meeting, so I came. My issue tonight, I've been a resident of Newark for 30 years. Proud of my city, love my city. For the last 15 years, I've been a resident of the Park Trails neighborhood. Recently, we were apparently designated as a crime watch neighborhood. Signs were put up in our neighborhood by apparently the police department. I was unaware that we had been designated such a neighborhood, and I don't know why we were designated such a neighborhood, how that decision was made. Unfortunately, right or wrong, when I see signs saying Crime Watch neighborhood, I wonder what's the reason? Is this a high crime neighborhood? And so I'm concerned that the addition of the signs to my neighborhood makes it look as though I'm a high crime neighborhood. Called the police department. We were told that, any remedy, if we have questions about the sign, would have to go through city council, or perhaps our HOA could do something. But what was upsetting to me was that prior to the signs being placed, there was no communication with the residents of the neighborhood. I think if something like this is being done, that the police department should talk to the citizens of the neighborhood, let us know that this is being done, why it's being done, what is all involved. Are there going to be people patrolling our neighborhood, or residents of the neighborhood going to be walking around? I don't know. So in the future, I would appreciate if there is something like this being decided, that communication be given to the residents of the neighborhood so we know why and what it all involves and what it entails. Thank you.
Thank you. I could be mistaken, but I believe they have a conversation with the HOA, although I could be wrong. But okay.
So we didn't see anything advertised by our HOA saying that there was going to be a meeting. do understand that there might have been a meeting that was advertised on a social media website that I'm not a party to.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anyone else for this first sec? Ms. Carnegie.
I'm Jen Carnegie, 2584 Upland View Court. I am not here in any other position other than as a resident of Park Trails. I'm not representing an HOA board. I'm not. That's totally separate right now. So I had talked with Trent, our previous community officer, while I was running for city council, and we talked about crime in the neighborhood and in Ward 3 in general. And there were a lot of issues that had come up. And then when he stepped down and went back to doing whatever he was doing, Derek Beach came on board. Really great guy. Very dynamic, has a ton of good ideas. He said, if you want to, start a block watch there, call a meeting, we'll get together, have people come. I'll tell you how to do it. I'll tell you how to put it together, give you some suggestions. So we had seen an uptick in crime. And if you get on this neighborhood app, there are complaints of creepers out at 5 in the morning, 2 in the morning. I have had personal messages come in about drug deals going down at our pond. And I was coming home from a meeting one night, and literally I saw exactly what the resident had described to me. Cars like this, one going that way, one going that way. I pulled up, wrote down the license plates, and they sped off. So I'm assuming that that's what they were seeing, was people exchanging drugs money in front of our pond. There have been needles and backpacks found along the bike trail. My house personally, there was an attempted break-in, and Derek Beach was the officer who ran on that call. Both of our sliding back doors were broken and damaged. So we felt that there was a need to form a block watch. People walk constantly. People have dogs. If you see something's happening, your dog's barking, report it. Who do we report it to? So we don't have a good communication system with our HOA. We didn't get a bill for a year, but that's been taken care of. I don't know if they're working on their communication. I can't speak to that. But our neighborhood primarily uses the Nextdoor app. So a couple of us got together. We picked a date, got the Granville Library spot. We posted an event, and some people showed up. Derek came. He was extremely professional, very courteous, answered all of our questions, gave some really great ideas. I had a busy weekend and I had to work, so I came back a couple days later. I posted, not minutes, because we're not a board, we're not anything. I posted kind of, this were the 1 through 10. This is what he suggested. He suggested we post signs because that will keep crime down, especially along the bike trail. That's what we talked about. I live on the bike trail. I know somebody tried to break in the back of our house. So, okay, we're going to do the signs along the bike trail. And then there were some emails that went back and forth between him, I think, and the street department, maybe. I don't know. Then we hadn't heard anything else. And we're all busy, and, it's a volunteer position. So we were going to schedule another meeting, do a flyer, and make sure we flyered everybody. That some people, the older people, don't use the neighborhood apps all the time. So we were going to include everybody and try to have like a get-together, a barbecue or something over the summer, bring everybody together. And last week, it must have been, I don't think I was at home. My neighbor said he saw a police officer, which is extremely rare for park trails. He saw a police officer kind of sitting there by the bike trail, and I said, I bet it was Officer Beach, and I bet they were doing the signs. Well, then about a day or two later, this whole thing blew up on the Nextdoor app. People were furious about the signs. They think we're advertising crime. So I called Derek, and he was teasing me. He said, I'm going to bring 15 more signs to you. I said, I don't know anything about the signs. I didn't know where they were going to go. I don't want to have anything to do with them. So he said, please, if anybody has a problem, if they don't understand it, if they don't understand how it works, have them call me. I welcome their calls. I will talk to them. I will explain how it's helped in other neighborhoods, in other areas. He was very nice this morning. As I was on the ledge yesterday, I'm like ready to list my house and move, and people are just getting really kind of mean. So that's how this whole meeting happened with Derek Beach. And he made suggestions, and then he started implementing those so that the next time we had a meeting, he wanted to teach people how to use the website for Newark PD. And I had listed the sites. This is where you go to file a complaint for drugs. This is where you go to file a complaint for speeders. I mean, he really had a nice program put together. But unfortunately, the signs apparently set off a dumpster fire in my neighborhood. So it was not his fault. I mean, apparently it's just how it's been. You put up the signs, you get people, taught on how to use the internet and file complaints and who to talk to. So I just wanted to explain that and say, he's not in trouble. I don't think he tried to do anything, underhanded or not tell people what he was doing or try to make it look like we're a crime city out there. I've been uneasy about the whole thing this weekend, so I just kind of wanted to say clarify the story, and if you need anything, let me know.
Thank you for clearing that up. Anyone else on this section? Okay. We'll move on to ordinances on the first reading, 18-09.
Ordinance 18-09 by Mr. Cost and Mr. Marmee, an ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances and resolutions as part of the various component codes of the codified ordinances, providing for the adoption of new matter in the updated and revised codified ordinances, repealing ordinances and resolutions in conflict therewith, and declaring an emergency.
This is on the first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Rath?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 18-09.
Motion by Mr. Rath. Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 18-09?
Mr. President.
Mr. Rath?
This is a routine piece of legislation that we do annually to bring records up to date so that they're all consistent with us as well as the state. The reason that we're declaring emergency is to meet deadlines.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. Anyone else? Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes. 18-09 passes 10-0. Next, resolutions on the second reading, 18-23.
Resolution 18-23 by Mr. Cost and Mr. Frazier, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to apply for financial support from the state of Ohio 2018 Nature Works grant.
You've heard the second reading of 18-23. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
Make a motion to adopt resolution 18-23.
Motion by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 18-23? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes. 18-23 passes 10-0. Next on the second reading, 18-24.
Resolution 18-24 by Mr. Marmee and Mr. Cost, a resolution appropriating and disappropriating monies for the current expenses of municipal corporation.
You've heard the second reading of 18-24. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
Make a motion to adopt resolution 18-24.
Motion by Mr. Marmee, second by Mr. Cost. Is there any discussion on 18-24?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. In section 4, the dollar amount was is $1,250,000. I need to make a motion to amend that figure to $1,125,000. That amount the initial amount was incorrect, and they found the error.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Marmee to amend, second by Mr. Frazier. So our amendment is on section 4 from $1,250,000 to $1,125,000. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Autumn, please call the roll on the amendment. To vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes. Section 4 has been amended. Now, is there any discussion on 18-24 as amended? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll and vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes. 18-24 as amended passes 10-0. Next, we move on to resolutions on first reading, 18-25.
Resolution 18-25 by Mr. Marmee and Mr. Cost, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to accept bids and sell certain surplus personal property now owned by the City of Newark, Ohio, and declaring that such property is no longer needed for any municipal purpose and declaring an emergency.
18-25 is on the first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 18-25.
Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Cost. Is there any discussion on 18-25?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
this is our somewhat quarterly auction of automobiles. We've got 110 automobiles that we're auctioning off along with a variety of other things. The reason for the emergency is we need to make deadlines to advertise the auction prior to its event.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. Anyone else? Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes. 18-25 passes 10-0. Next on the first reading, we have 18-26.
Resolution 18-26 by Mr. Marmee and Mr. Cost, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to apply for funding from the United States Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance, under the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant Program.
18-26 will be held for 2 weeks to our next council meeting. Next, we have 18-27.
Resolution 18-27 by Mr. Marmee and Mr. Cost, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of municipal corporation.
18-20.
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
Make a motion to waive the 2-day reading rule on resolution 18-27.
Second.
Motion to waive the 2-day reading rule by Mr. Marmee, second by Mr. Frazier. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. We need to expedite this because we have some payouts for terminations, so therefore we're going to get that money to those employees as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Marmee. Autumn, please call the roll to waive the 2-day reading rule.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes. 2-day reading rule has been waived. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion to adopt resolution 18-27.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Marmee, second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any other discussion on 18-27? Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes. 18-27 passes 10-0. Next on the first reading, we have 18-28.
Resolution 18-28 by Mr. Marmee and Mr. Cost, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to prepare and submit applications to the Ohio Governor's Office of Criminal Justice Services for fiscal year 2018 Edward Byrne Justice Assistant Grant Funding.
18-28 will be held to our next meeting. Next, we have 18-29.
Resolution 18-29 by Mr. Marmee and Mr. Cost, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to prepare and submit applications to the Ohio Department of Transportation for the 2018 Transportation Alternatives Program to partially fund 2 future projects.
18-29 will be held to our next meeting. And finally, we have 18-30.
Resolution 18-30 by Mr. Cost and Mr. Marmee. Resolution 18-30 is preliminary legislation cooperating with ODOT for the replacement of Cherry Valley Road Bridge within the city of Newark.
And 18-30 will be held to our next meeting. And that concludes our legislation this evening. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have your second opportunity for comments from citizens. Once again, this is non-debate with council. This is just your chance to be heard. If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand so I'll know. Wait.
My name is Edward William Butcher, 263 Union Street. I would like to know when my street's going to get paved, and I'd like to know what the city's going to do about some of the potholes right here in the city. And I'd like to know what they're going to do about the people speeding up and down my street, the hours of night, drag racing, playing loud music, top of the weather forecast, mainly cloudy. Chance of snow be tapering off by Saturday. Should be okay for the marathon on the Church Street. When the next warm-up's going to be, we'll talk about that in my next top of the weather forecast.
Thank you, William. You know it's snowing right now, right? Yep. Anyone else? Okay. Any city officials this evening? Mr. Motter.
Thank you. I just want to bring the attention of two projects that are going on in the city. One has recently been completed, and one's going to take place this Saturday. I'm giving you a handout with some pictures of the recently completed cemetery wall, retainer wall system that was installed off of Cedar Street at the cemetery. We had a real severe grade coming down from the cemetery to the sidewalks along Cedar Street. It made it almost impossible for Mr. Hoskis and his crew to mow it. It had to be actually mowed by hand with weed whackers, and it has been done so for many, many years. I want to give credit to Service Director Dave Rhodes. He saw this issue. He came to me looking for some funding to how we could correct this problem, how we can make it safer, and maybe beautify it at the same time. So we've used some community development block grant funds from the Department of Development, about $250,000 to be exact. We tore down the old wrought iron fence that paralleled the sidewalk, between the sidewalk and the cemetery grounds. We installed a very nice retainer wall system that you can see there with a nice fence, new fencing that's attached to it as well. In addition, we took on replacing the sidewalks along Cedar Street and the curbing. So I think you can see we have a first-rate project there that we can all be proud of. It's one of our entry gateways to the city of Newark, and I think this really makes a nice impression and it's certainly an enhancement of that area. So again, I'd just like to recognize Mr. Rhodes, Brian Moorhead, who oversaw the engineering of the project, and Jeff Hotchkiss, our Parks Director, for overseeing it as well. And I'd also like to recognize my two staff members in the Department of Development, Barbara Gilks, who make sure we get our community development block grant funds faithfully every year so we can put these funds to good use, and also Melissa Seville, who handled all the accounting and the paperwork for it. The other item I want to bring to your attention is we are using the community development block grant funds from the Department of Development to do a neighborhood cleanup project. And that neighborhood cleanup project is going to take place this Saturday, April 21st, from about 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's going to be held in a portion of the east side of the city. To be specific, the western boundary will be the Licking River. The eastern boundary will be Oakwood Avenue. Northern boundary would be Route 16. And then the southern boundary are the streets of Baker, Henderson, and Webb, and Allen. And we sent out flyers to the residents who live in that area that this is a free of charge way to dispose of items that could become potential property maintenance items that the city has to deal with. So we're anxious to do this. We haven't done one of these for quite a while, and we're going to send about 3 dumpsters, 30-yard dumpsters, out where the basketball courts are located off of East Main Street. And we'll have city staff there, people from my department, Jeff Hotchkiss' department, to help people unload the goods and put them into the dumpsters. And, of course, Joe Paul, property maintenance, and George Carter have been involved with this as well. So, again, another collaborative effort with the Department of Development, property maintenance, and in this case, again, the parks people. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Motter. Any other city officials? Our Honorable Law Director.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll pass.
Mayor Hall.
I'll go ahead and pass the lane too. Thank you.
Mr. Fennell.
I'll pass, thank you.
Mr. Frazier.
Mr. President,
Ms. Hall.
I'm excited for the community cleanup on the 21st. The HHCA is also doing a cleanup on the same day, so we're right beside each other, so if we have anything too big, we'll be sure to bring it over to you, so we appreciate that. On the 12th, we also have the yard sale at the HHCA. It's a big community event, as well as the plant sale that goes on simultaneously. So that's always a good event. I am going to call an Economic Development Committee for the next session. Child Abuse Prevention Month, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for presenting that. The statistics are troubling, 1778, 2660 of children being affected. Went to this walk a couple years ago, and it really is impressive walking up there, and they usually put little indicators of all the children that were impacted by this, and it is a really eye-opening experience to understand that. And then Elizabeth, thank you for coming. This is exactly what the forum is in order to have your addresses be heard. You did a wonderful job, and hopefully we can find some sort of resolution in order to keep the aesthetics of your community as well as raise the issues and further protect people for whatever is in the community's best interest. We don't want singular voices being heard, but we also want to improve the community as best we can, and with honestly the neighbors' interests at the forefront. And so thank you for coming. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Ms. Hall.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to thank Mr. Mutter and all those involved in arranging the 21st cleanup. I hope that's successful, and I expect a report later. Thank you. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Levitas.
Mr. President, I will pass this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Levitas. Mr. Lang.
Yeah, I've got a couple of events I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. So our 2 canine units, as everybody knows, are nearing retirement, Ike and Bear, and I talked to Officer Blind over the weekend at the Pause for Cause, and I understand fundraising's going well, but we've still got another fundraiser coming up here. It's the Licking County Humane Society is hosting a benefit for the canine unit, and that's going to take place on May 17th. I want to make sure everybody gets that on their calendars. That's at 8 o'clock, and tickets are $20. You can get them at 31west.com. And thank you, Mayor, for the proclamation regarding the Child Abuse Prevention Month as well. You know, a lot of that really comes out of our issues are compounded recently by the addiction crisis that's going on in our community. And so I wanted to highlight the event that's coming up. Your Voice Ohio is hosting a forum on the addiction crisis in Newark. Your Voice Ohio, it's a group of several media outlets, and the Advocate is one of those groups. And that forum is going to be 6:30 to 8:30. That's on Tuesday, April 24th. And that's also at 31 West. I know admission is free, but I think there is limited space, so go online and get your tickets to that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, coming up and being the only lawyer on City Council, I thought I should mention this. Law Day is May 1st, and that's a national day of celebration, actually started by Eisenhower back in the 50s. But the point is to take time to reflect on the role of law in the foundation of our country, and to recognize the importance it plays in our democracy. And so to commemorate that day, there's going to be a celebration at the Licking County Courthouse on the square downtown, and that starts at 5 o'clock. We're going to have the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts there to kick off things. The K-9 unit will be there to do some demonstrations. The Code Task Force is going to present on the opioid epidemic. You can get a tour from the courthouse from our assistant prosecutors. They're going to talk about how they prosecute cases. Judge Brandstuhl is going to present on the criminal case process. There's going to be some refreshments, and you can get a tour of the jail as well. So, you know, it's going to be a great event. It's being organized by the folks over at the Domestic Relations Court, Judge Frost, and you guys probably know why I'm mentioning this. My wife, Magistrate Deborah Lang, she's also in charge. So if you want to participate or you just want more information, reach out to me and I can get you in touch with them. But, you know, as representatives here from the legislative branch of Newark, I think it's important that we as the city council members take time to participate in that day. And of course, it's going to be a great opportunity for the rest of the community as well to learn about the different branches of government locally and how they serve our local community. And with that, I'll pass.
Mr. Lamont, for that shameless pitch for your wife.
May 1st, 5 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. President. I need to call a Finance Committee meeting, and with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Marmon. Mr. Rapp.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll call a Service Committee meeting. I did want to mention there is, in relation to the fundraisers for the K-9 units, there's one other fundraiser coming up that's near, and that's a week from this Friday, the 27th. It's a spaghetti dinner that starts at 5:30 at the Moose Lodge. And if I can plan your entire night, I want to encourage you to come downtown and patronize all the businesses downtown as well. But there's still a lot of businesses on West Church Street between 3rd and 4th, which is now under construction.
and still a lot of great events going on in that area. On Friday the 27th, after I go to the spaghetti dinner, I'll be going to 31 West. They have a really big name up-and-coming country artist in Mo Pitney, who's going to be performing there for the second time. And we have our other local country artist celebrity, Cliff Cody, that's opening up for him. So that's on Friday night. Unfortunately, I missed the show on Saturday night, which is a great show, which is John Popper. John Popper is the founding member of the Blues Travelers, and I'm a huge Blues Travelers fan. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attend that. But if you do attend that, then I would encourage you to stop by Moe's Barbecue, right next to it, which is on West Church Street, in between that construction area. If you're up early in the morning, go to Daisy's for breakfast. If you're feeling like you need to get fit, there's a yoga studio there. There's a Denison Art Place. There's just a lot of stuff going on there. And I'm telling you, Mo Pitney and John Popper, those will be big shows. There'll be a lot of people there. They had a show about a week or so ago that drew a huge crowd. Wasn't my crowd, I didn't go, but drew a huge crowd. And even with West Church Street shut down, there's still parking available in the evenings. And they've done a great job of keeping the sidewalks open so that their foot traffic is fairly easy. I promise you, you don't have to walk miles and miles and miles. It's a short little walk. So patronize those businesses if you would. And Elizabeth Hampton, I want to thank you for coming down and speaking. I am your councilman, so I would love to introduce myself afterwards if you want to stick around, if you don't have to run off. Jen Carnegie, thank you for putting a block watch together, and I think that's a great thing. And having a block watch, I personally believe having a block watch is a good idea, and having block watch signs don't necessarily advertise a crime-ridden neighborhood. I think what they advertise more is a unified community that sends a signal out to the criminals that there's people that are watching, and there's people that are going to do something and say something if they see something. So I think that's honestly, I think the signs are deterrent. And Park Trails is not exclusive to an area, just like any other place in Newark. There's crime in Park Trails, and there's crime in the neighborhood that I live, and there's crime in the neighborhood that you live. Wherever you are, it's there. So whatever we could do to curtail that, I think is a good thing. And a block watch is a great way to get that done. So I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. Probably am forgetting something, but I'll pass it anyway.
All right, Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. President. Going off Mr. Rath's list of great things happening at 31 West, I was at an event Saturday night, the Rockapella concert, and that was a great time. So I do want to encourage people to support the businesses of West Church Street during the construction. I want to put out an extra shout out to Director Motter. I've had the joy of working with him on this neighborhood revitalization committee, and we went and visited. We were sort of looking at different possibilities of different ways to improve neighborhoods. And last week, Director Motter, United Way, representatives from United Way, Housing Coalition, some other groups went over to First Columbus, and we met with some development people and neighborhood improvement people over there, which was a good visit. And then we also, the team made a visit to Cincinnati and made a team there. Unfortunately, Dr. Motter couldn't make it with us there, but I thought visiting sort of those cities. We do have urban problems here in our city of Newark, and so having discussions and developing some relationships with those other community officials was really beneficial. So Director Motter, thank you for going along with those. I do want to announce some community cleanups were mentioned tonight. April 28th is a community cleanup for the South Newark Civic Association. They meet at 8:30 at St. John's Church on National Drive, and so we didn't know about Director Motter's dumpsters being set up, but Waste Management is helping us with a dumpster for that day. That's April 28th, is that neighborhood cleanup in the morning. And they do provide lunch if you volunteer. And with that, I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Mr. Bob.
I will pass. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Bob. And Mr. Cost.
Director Motter, thank you so much for bringing this to Cedar Hill. It looks fabulous. It's an amazing difference thank you all and everyone involved. I'm very encouraged to hear that Park Trails is getting proactive about the idea of a neighborhood block watch. In my 7 years here, I've seen many, many positive results from a neighborhood block watch. I think it's the best idea. Of course, you want good communication, you want everybody involved, you want everybody on board, but to have those extra pair of eyes keeping watch on things is just incredibly important, and I've seen a lot of success in a lot of neighborhoods all over this city. That'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Cost. I'd just like to thank everyone for coming tonight. We appreciate it. Our next meeting, the next committee and council meeting will start at 5:45 on Monday, May the 7th. Council will start promptly at 7 p.m. So motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Rass, second by Mr. Bob. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.